What do you do when it won't stop hurting? I made a promise, I responded calmly. That man looked back at me wearily. He had heard this before. And while his appearance was like lightning and his clothes were white as snow, the very human facial flaws betrayed part of his true self. You're not understanding, the man in white responded. I am understanding, I responded calmly. Then you're making a decision you'll regret. I breathed deeply, slowly. I don't have time for regret anymore. The man's face took on an ashen hue that seemed so broken against his brilliant clothes. You have nothing but time now. He wrinkled his brow. You do understand that you're dead, right? I looked across the room at my daughter. She was trying valiantly to reapply the mascara that had run down her face, but the tears hadn't quite stopped. Fortunately, she had kept the inky makeup from dripping onto her dazzlingly white dress. Katie, a woman's voice called from the other side of the door. You've been fixing your makeup for 10 minutes. We can't start without you. The voice was excited, but nervous. Come on, everyone wants to see the most important moment of your life. My daughter pitched forward, catching a fresh batch of silent tears before they could run down her cheek. Just a sec, Maria. Somehow, her voice sounded light and fresh. Katie was always so strong. I was glad not to be wearing mascara. She cannot see you or hear you, the man in white pressed, and she never will again. He moved in front of me, because I could not take my eyes off of her. But if you don't come with me right now, the opportunity to move on will be lost forever. My head slumped, and I wished that I could act as strong as she did. I know how painful this can be, trust me, he continued with a note of finality. But there isn't any benefit in staying. I looked past him. I made a promise. The man looked worn through, like fabric so thin that it can hardly be touched without tearing wide open. You want to spend the rest of time watching your daughter grow old, wasting years of loneliness while she never knows of your presence, until she too succumbs to the effects of time that you are so determined to refuse acceptance of. The man pulled his hair tightly before dropping his arms limply to his sides. What could be worth giving up on the next stage of eternity, when all you'll have is loss? I finally turned to meet his eyes, and I intend to keep it. We stood, frozen, for a moment longer. Neither one of us needed to speak. Katie, Maria called from the other side of the door. They're going to think I'm the worst maid of honor in the history of maids of honor if you don't get your gorgeous butt out here in front of these people. There was more than an edge of panic in her voice. I looked up to speak with the man in white, but he had already disappeared, leaving a clear view of my daughter. She was indescribable. Though she'd been sobbing just minutes before, her skilled hand had adjusted all the makeup on her face to seem like she wasn't wearing any. The reflection staring back at me in the mirror was picture perfect. She forced a smile, and it was the saddest, most beautiful thing. I'm sorry this wasn't a few days earlier, Daddy, she whispered. I promise I'm not mad at you for not being here. I waited for the tears, but quickly realized that they only appeared on my own face. She pressed open the double doors to the dressing room to see her entire bridal party looking up at her. Though she was beautiful in the moment, it wasn't shock or admiration that floated through them. It was simple joy, and was a type of joy that could only exist that exact way in a single moment before that moment would pass. They smiled, and no one saw me. Then everyone scrambled to line up outside the church doors. Dappled sunlight danced over crevices in the etched stone. St. Francis Parish Est 1913 played in tones of polarized light and darkness. The bridesmaids and groomsmen paired up with each other. Katie stood alone at the end. I took my place next to her. She did not notice. Soon we were the only two who had not walked down the aisle. She pulled her hair in anticipation. She always pulled her hair in anticipation. Relax your hands, Katie Bug. She didn't look at me, but her hands fell to her sides. Okay, this is it. This is the biggest moment of your life. The music changed, and the crowd rose to its feet. A surge of emotion washed over me, and I was glad that no one could see how much I was wiping my eyes. This is the beginning, Katie. Some people say it's the hardest part. That's true in its own way, but that's what makes it so exciting. I rested my fingertips on her elbow, and we took the first step forward in unison. I won't say that everything will be fine when you take the plunge, because that would be a lie. I took a moment to find my breath. In fact, the opposite is true. Given enough time, there will be a mistake, a tragedy, a regret that cannot be undone. The curls in her hair bounced as she stepped deliberately forward, eyes never moving from the altar. But the exact same thing is true about every good thing, Katie. That's what will get you through the difficulties in the beginning. Every new thing in life was guaranteed to be unexpected, and all you know is that they're still waiting to find you. Her mascara held firm, but I think it was starting to waver. We were halfway down the aisle. This is the middle. A saying tells us that sailors fear this part the most, because it's the farthest from the safety of any shore. I looked back to the church doors, then turned ahead to contemplate the altar ahead of us. It has all sorts of names, Katie. The 7-year itch, midlife crisis, any number of sayings refer back the same thing. People are afraid of themselves in the middle because potential has either become reality or withered away, and this when they realize what lost opportunities will never come back. They're locked in, but not free, because the restricted path they've laid out before them has little room to escape, but so much ground to cover. This is when people stop dreaming about what they might be and realize who they are, which terrifies the hell out of most of us. I nodded quietly while she deftly wiped an eye. This can be hard in ways that defy words, because each person looks inward and finds a different reason to be unhappy with him or herself. I moved to brush a lock of hair past her ear, but was powerless to do so. But this is where you can be the happiest, because the middle is where the most memories are made. I was jelly-legged at this point, but Katie was steady as a ticking clock as she approached the first step up the altar. And now we've reached the end, I wheezed, half a step behind her. The type of fear at this point is an entirely different breed. The feelings I experienced upon hearing the diagnosis. I struggled for the words as she moved toward the final step. I didn't know that my mind had the capacity to feel those kinds of emotions until 6 months before I died. It was terrifying to learn that there were parts of me that had gone unused for 70 years, because it meant that there must be some unknown parts of my spirit that would go forever unfound. It is inevitable that some regrets will go unsolved in the end, and time doesn't care if we find peace before we reach that point. She stopped in front of the altar and took his hands in her own. There was no hiding the tears at this point, but she was smiling, so I didn't know at first if they were from joy or from pain. It took several seconds for me to understand that they are the same thing in the greatest moments of our lives. But the pain of every step, Katie, please understand this. Please. It makes sense in the end. I didn't bother wiping my eyes anymore. Her smile was growing stronger, and I rushed to finish what I was saying. I realized it on that hospital bed right at the end, when the cancer had moved to my throat and I couldn't talk anymore. My breath was racing. I was going to die. The doctors were powerless. So will you, Katie. You're inflicted with a condition called life, and I have to inform you that it's terminal. Have you accepted that? Probably not. I hadn't really considered the fact that I would die until that fact was imminent. I rested my hands on her shoulders, but she didn't feel a thing. We are promised nothing more than the rule that we will die one day. There will be an end, and there's no hope to stop it. Do you see why that's so wonderful? She laughed. No one had said a word. She was just overtaken in a moment of joy. I smiled. I means that every good thing in life is a gift. Not a single moment of joy was promised through our birth. Each good thing that we ever experienced was an unexpected benefit that the universe decided to give us with no explanation whatsoever. I took in a deep, shuddering breath. I'm looking back on a life filled with both incomprehensible joy and exquisite pain, which are the byproducts of nothing more than the promise that I would experience loss before dying. Her husband wiped her eyes, and she didn't feel the need to hide her tears anymore. I can't believe I was given so much. She placed her hands on his shoulders, and I removed mine from hers. And this is the end, Katie. I stepped back toward the shadows as the crowd of friends and family cheered. I told you last week that I would walk you down the aisle, no matter how bad the cancer got. Everyone thought I was guaranteed to fail, but they didn't understand. I made a promise,